Welcome to the Experience Strategy Podcast, where we talk to customers and experts about how to create products and services that feel like time well spent. And now, here are your hosts, experienced strategists, Dave Norton and Aranza Savas.
Welcome to the Experience Strategy Podcast. I'm your host, Aranza Savas.
And I'm Dave Norton.
And today we welcome Dutta Sotadip. So Dutta is the Chief Customer Office at ActiveCampaign and the former Global Head of Customer Operations at Pinterest, Director of Customer Success for the Americas region at Google. So when we started to put our heads together to really plan out the charter and the learning goals for the 2023-2024 Digital Experience Collaborative, we knew we wanted to talk to Dutta about what he sees coming down the pike for digital experiences, the roles that AI and other emerging technologies will play in our experience strategies. And we are so thrilled to welcome him here today for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, it's nice to be here on camera. And for those of you who are listening to the podcast, just a friendly reminder that we're also feeding this over to YouTube. So if you're somebody who listens, engages better visually, find us on YouTube, experiencestrategypodcast.com. We'd love to connect with you there. So as we jump in here, Dutta, it has been a time of great change for customer experience strategies. And for you, especially as somebody who has worked in such massive tech-led experience companies throughout the course of your career, we're just really excited to hear your perspective on the future of digital experience strategies. So to sort of kick things off, what do you see as the biggest changes recently with regard to data and digital experience strategies?
It truly is a time of great change, and I feel like a lot of the pieces have been coming in together for the longest periods of time. I think one of the biggest things I will say is probably in the last 10 years, there's been an increasing understanding that the customer preferences have changed. And to drive those preferences, companies need to build their own data sets, whether it is to acquire customers, whether it is to retain customers, or whether it is to personalize the product. I think what's been pivotal, in my opinion, probably in the last 6 to 9 months has been, while the data has been there and some of the algorithms have been there, it has sort of made a little bit of a jump where we now see a lot of the use cases that have gone from pure simplistic find an answer to find the right and high quality answer. Think things like the co-pilots and other things that are coming up as a result of AI. Number two, an increased sense of the requirements for automation because I think the macroeconomic conditions are such, as well as overall customer expectations of what good means has simply changed. And I think there's also going to be more and more personalization, both in terms of predicting what the customer wants, as well as delivering that in the product itself.
As you look at the landscape, who do you feel like is really leading the charge in creating more meaningful digital experiences?
I think it's hard to name one company or one example, but I can talk about a few examples of how this change is coming about and perhaps a few sets of examples. So I'll start with a very simple sort of one, which is around personalization, a service perhaps a lot of us have experienced one way or the other. And I would say a good example of using your data, using your preferences to drive personalization would be something like Netflix. Each of our own, whatever we see in our Netflix profiles is relatively unique to who we are. Of course, they have a few things like top 10s or whatever, but most of the recommendation spectrum is based on our personal viewing habits. So I think it's a great example, I would say, of personalization. And there's an element of prediction in it because they're trying to anticipate what is it that you will like. But I'll also say it is not the most, it still has some room for improvement when you look at all the other things that Netflix is trying to deliver in terms of, let's say, their customer service experience or their overall experience for upgrading customers or retaining customers. So they've done a very good job on the product side of the house. On the customer experience, customer service delivery side of the house, I think Amazon does an amazing job when it comes to transactional elements. For example, if something goes wrong with your order, they are relatively good in able to predict and even offer resolution pretty much on the chatbot. But the place it starts to break down, where I believe the opportunity is not every problem is going to be discrete. Like, I'll have an order number. I'll be able to specify exactly what went wrong through a drop-down box, and then the resolution comes out. What the transformation that I see coming in front of us is people are able to describe what they want. And that is the large language models a la ChatGPT that is basically helping us communicate with much more levels of flexibility and describability. And I think that's what's going to be probably the next evolution on both personalization as well as service delivery.
Yeah, well said.
So Duda, let me ask, do you foresee artificial intelligence basically providing that extra flexibility that historically only a human has been able to provide? So in fact, maybe what you're suggesting is that it'll be even more rare for consumers when they're working with an Amazon.com or a Netflix to actually interact with a human, but they'll have the same flexibility that they might have if they were working with a human. Is that what you're describing?
I'm definitely describing a version of that. I mean, if I can take a step back, Dave, and like kind of go through maybe like three phases that I see of this evolution, right? There's sort of like understanding the context of the customer, right? I like to call it like the perception phase of like what you're trying to do, like what's happening with the customer. Is there like a basic recommendation that you can take it forward? Then there's a sequence of things that you can do to automate that, right? And the last portion of this is some version of prediction, right? So if you take each of these phases and you say, where are we today? The reason we are talking to a lot of human beings for the most part is it's more often than not hard to describe our problems and what's going on. Order tracking is super simple, but let's say we wanted to make a complicated travel itinerary where there were multiple components that you're trying to describe. It's going to be hard to explain that just with checkboxes and drop downs. And we do it today as we book many travel sequences. We give our dates. We try to do the best we can for the most transactional elements. But when it comes to the experiential elements of our travel or vacation planning, we either do it all separately or we ask someone, and that's where the human element comes in. And I think what's going to be more and more prevalent is one, the first phase probably will be the humans who are delivering this will have some sort of a co-pilot experience where the software is able to give you a lot of these recommendations upfront, allowing customers to get what they need quickly through a human. And if it makes sense, some of them will automatically become more digital experiences, starting with automation and going to prediction.
That's so interesting and exciting. And it jives well with what we hear when we talk to customers about how they plan travel, how they make decisions about financial planners, any of these sort of guided experiences. They tell us they start with friends, family, and influencers. Really, those are the people who are telling them what to choose in large part, because they feel a sense of being known and understood by those groups. And I think what you're saying here makes so much sense, because there is an opportunity to have more open dialogue with this AI co-pilot. And in doing so, feel a sense of confidence that there is an understanding of your real needs, well beyond checkboxes.
I was particularly interested in the phases that you saw. Starts with context, then goes to automation, and then goes to anticipation. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because we have been exploring context for years. We've been studying anticipation for years as well, but we've never seen them in that kind of a sequence, and we haven't included automation. So can you walk us through why you see that as the steps?
Yeah, I probably see it that way because I mostly deal with software as a service, digital advertising. That's where I've come from. And a lot of the experience is fundamentally based on understanding who your customers are. So when I'm talking about that context, being able to perceive what's going on, the way I see it happening is you start to collect data about a bunch of things, right? Where are the customers coming from? What's the most likely first step they do? Where are they invoking the help from? What kind of resource do they look at before coming to your place, your website, your app? Where do they go after? And that gives you a sense of what's exactly going on with the customer at that moment in time. For example, if they are trying to create a marketing campaign and they're in the process of configuring an email and they're looking for some ideas, and they're going and either copying a template from someplace or looking for images or whatever, there is a certain level of context that's being presented that as I'm trying to craft an email, I need quality images. I'm looking for some inspiration on where to start. And I know kind of my next steps action items, but I have to stitch all of these things together. The place automation now comes in is now there is an opportunity for us to say some version of, hey, listen, this is a welcome email, but I don't just want to be an welcome email. I want them to actually respond to me. How do I make this more interesting? And that's where the start of automation happens. That also starts with saying, typically, if I do an email, right after that, what is the next step, right? What is the next step that happens? And typically, it may be something like, after that next step, maybe a follow-up and getting some personal information, some buying preferences, whatever it is. But that portion, we now have an ability to not only collect the data, merge that with what's going on in the product, and be able to have a much more customized workflow that normally somebody would have said, oh yeah, seems like we got a lot of customers, we should do something with them. But now there is enough data in the system, and there are enough systems to actually take all those steps and start to automate them.
And I just want to be clear about this from my own perspective. What you're saying is you have to collect that contextual data first, and you have to be able to make sense of that contextual data before you can start to automate anything per se.
Yes.
And when you start to automate, you're first going to automate things that are basically ways of helping them to better understand their context. And then you're going to move to automation that tries to help them to accomplish the job that they're trying to get done. And that's when you start to move into anticipation. Is that right?
That's absolutely spot on. That is absolutely spot on. Because at the end of the day, what you want to automate is going to be a function of where you are in your overall customer journey, right? Like if you're a first-time user, you're trying to set something up, you're going to have a very different set of steps, your jobs to be done, versus somebody who is set something up, taking a look at the dashboard, making some inferences, and there's probably like 5 or 7 steps you can take after that, but it's a function of somebody's already been in the product, they're in a particular portion of the product, and from that place, logically, you might do A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever the next step is.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. Moments before this conversation, I went on to Google Flights and tried to book a trip from New York to Dallas. And my first step was to put in some dates. And I was like, I don't really care when I go. I just want to, go get some FaceTime with grandma. So I'll try this price graph. And that opened up the lens a lot for me and started to point me in the direction of the best times. I clicked into those times and I was like, oh, that's because these are all for flights at 4 a.m. I don't want that. So then I went into the next filter, which was the time segments that I was open to. Once I refined that, I got data that was more useful for me as a consumer. And then I realized, well, I'm never flying Spirit Airlines. Sorry, I'm an experienced professional. You can't do that. So rules. So I went in, got rid of Spirit. Again, now I had a more useful data set. And so I gave them a ton of data about my travel preferences. And in return, they gave me some really good information that made it really easy for me to feel like I am booking the best available flight on the best available time for me today.
I'll give another very simple example. It's maybe it's a functionality I didn't know, but I've recently been using it a lot. An Apple Watch, you have that little, you have like an option to like start workouts. And for the longest time, the workouts used to be, you start the workout, you can see kind of your basics, and then you kind of end the workout. And in one of the recent updates, they have introduced the concept of zones, like where is your heart rate in there? Now, over a period of time, what they have realized is, there's some people who are using this on a regular basis. Maybe they need more information. And because they need more information, they are now going from, hey, this is where you are, it's just kind of recording everything. They're actually saying you are at the zone and would you like to do a little bit more? And that's the dialogue you're going to see happen. It's very subtle. I think a lot of people think about AI and machine learning and think like the robots are coming and, some version of Arnold is like manifesting with like the liquid metal and killing everybody. But my personal thesis is we're going to see it layered in very subtle ways everywhere. It just makes tasks slightly easier, slightly more anticipated. Like when I saw that, I was like, yep, this is exactly what I need. But I never actually articulated that need to anybody. And I think that's probably the first version of changes we are going to see as more of this technology is getting adopted.
And I think on the other hand, there in the early days of trying to use data to anticipate customers' needs, I was working at Weight Watchers, and you felt pretty safe, right? Like somebody's hiring a company called Weight Watchers. The principal job, certainly at that time, was to help people lose weight. Mm-hmm. So you would assume everybody's in weight loss mode at all times. But you would be very wrong.
Yes.
Sometimes people are on vacation and they're thrilled with gaining weight. Sometimes they're battling cancer and they're heartbroken at losing weight, right? And so it really is it's so individualized, and we can't just make these assumptions, and you use this example, of course, because you can see how emotionally vulnerable people are in relationship to our predictions and our responses to their expectations. And so I think what you're really pointing us to is, okay, let's stop assuming that our customers are all hiring us to do the same thing and that they all want the same thing at the same time. Rather, when they are, to use Stone Mantle's language, when they are in different modes, they have different needs. And the more data we have to pull on to understand which mode they're in, the better able we are to predict what they'll need next and better serve them.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. If I may say something, I feel like one of the things that is going to be really important here is the type of data that is being used to understand the context. And I think that spectrum is still rather wide. I can take something like a basic customer service experience where you can potentially start with a large language model that allows you to interact in a very conversational way. You can train the data on, let's say, your help centers and other things that have been there. But the output is only going to be as good as the input. What if you don't have the most latest ways of documenting all of your customers' issues, your products' issues in your help center, right? If that's not there in its best possible format, regardless of how great the conversation looks like, the quality element of it is not going to be as good. Are you training them on the data of your best agents, or maybe not all the agents are at the same level? If you train them all on the best agents, obviously you're going to get a very different kind of an output versus if it is all over the map. So I feel like that element of using data, finding the right type of data and high quality data that has some level of boundaries to them and a baseline of quality is going to be one of the bigger challenges of making this all a reality.
I totally agree. This one of the things that artificial intelligence is going to require is actually good data, or the ability to filter bad data. And that's still going to require people to kind of support and encourage. And one of the things that I'll be fascinated to see is when you've been told that the only way that you can get your prescription is to go through a drive-through and pick up your prescription, how will artificial intelligence suggest that maybe that's not the best way for you, given your circumstances, that maybe having it delivered to your home is better, since you've already established this pattern? The Bayesian algorithms would suggest that the best route would be to do what you've done in the past. But what do you do going forward when there's a better alternative, but you as a human haven't experienced it yet?
I think you have hit the nail on the head. There is the technology element of it, and there is a fundamental change management element of this. If somebody's been doing something all the while, to assume that they're going to do something radically different just because the technology exists or it's somewhat slightly better, maybe it is better, but not for that person because their context is different. And this is where I feel like there's going to be multiple reasons. This is why I believe in that most of the time, what we're going to see is some level of suggestions, recommendations on what to try differently. And as more people try different things, the systems are probably going to morph and provide different things. For example, you can still have, if somebody, I'm putting this up there, maybe somebody feels that they need to have a conversation with the pharmacist about the medications they pick up, right? Or they like the human interaction of a drive-through experience where somebody says hello, somebody says, hey, how's your day? Maybe they drive in through that Starbucks every single morning around the same time. The same person in the shift says, hi, Dave. It's great to see you again, right? There are like elements of this that is personalized. And I do believe some of those elements are going to persist, at least in the near future. I think where things are going to become easier, perhaps, is maybe anticipating the order. You can think about, instead of going all the way through and pressing the button and placing your order, etc., it scans your car, if you're willing to give that information, your car number, and it associates your license plate with your orders and just says, is it the regular? Right? And so that you're not having to blurt out your order, your entire list of Starbucks preferences, and it just goes from there. So I think there are many ways to anticipate with the technologies we currently have and augment those experiences, whereas, errors in the order, all of that stuff sort of starts to go away very, very rapidly. You ultimately, the folks who are delivering the experience can truly deliver a great experience versus focusing on the transactional elements of delivering that service.
So, Dave, I know you right now are deep in the process of defining the charter and the teams who will participate in the Digital Experience Collaborative for 2023-2024. That's such a mouthful. And as you listen to what Dutta is sharing, how do you think this influences the work that you'll do next year?
Man, Dutta, you have covered some of the ground that we have been striving to articulate. I'm very excited about this idea of moving from context to automation to anticipation. That's a fascinating new framework for our team to be thinking about. We've been working on anticipation. We've been working on context. We haven't really thought about automation. We certainly haven't thought of them in terms of sequence. What we're trying to do this year in the Digital Experience Company Collaborative is to help companies regardless of the industry that they come from. So you can be a traditional financial institution, or you can be a technology-first company. We're trying to help you to think through how you should make decisions about what comes first, what you should be implementing first, what is the role that artificial intelligence is going to play, how do you keep your experience and improve the experience, because as Dutta pointed out, customer expectations are changing dramatically. And if you think that your customer just wants a drive-through for their prescription, you're going to find out that that's not the case now that Amazon has come online with a really powerful alternative to that. So companies need to be prepared to really be at the forefront of, at least to be able to see where things are headed, even if it's going to take their organization a little bit of time to get there. That's what we're going to be doing in the Digital Experience Company Collaborative this year. And I have learned some really important things just from our brief conversation with Duda. So I hope we get a chance to keep working with you in the collaborative in some way, shape, or form. That would be fantastic.
Absolutely, would love that. And Dave, one thing, the way I kind of like to unpack this is, data is like the fundamental building block of all of this. I mean, you've talked a lot about context. You've talked about not just the context in which they're entering, what they're doing, the jobs to be done. I think that's like the foundation. Net, that's just where everything starts. But I think for me, when I think about experience, I think there's like a few aspects for us to consider. There are elements that are still optimally delivered with care, with empathy, and you need a human being to do that. But to deliver that care or empathy, maybe there's an opportunity to take a step back and say, how much of the work or how much of the time that they're spending is truly on that empathy experience level, and how much of this is transactional. And the elements that are transactional, maybe the bridge from understanding the context to automation is evaluating those elements and saying, hey, seems like this is something, if we had better understanding, we could get to this person in a much more easy, digestible way. That's honestly, when people are talking about co-pilots, right? That's the basic kind of premise around co-pilots is they're helping you. They're almost like your virtual assistant, helping you accomplishing a whole bunch of things that normally would take a sequence of steps in some form or the other.
Yeah, I think it brings more meaning to the experience. And again, it lets us, for lack of a better word, it lets us guess better. It lets us be more right more of the time.
Yes.
Are we always going to get it right? No, but let's do what we can to mess up less, to get closer really to what our customer needs in that first interaction.
I think that's another very good point you're mentioning. I'm just thinking about whenever you come to prediction, it's called prediction. It's not truth telling. Right. And prediction means there is a probability and a range of success. Having in this co-pilot mode, having the co-pilot assist a human being does one very important thing for companies and brands. It mitigates the effect of false positives. Because if somebody's been doing this job, they kind of know that's not the right answer, and they're just not going to blurt it out. Whereas if you are trying to go and conquer the problem of all sorts of problems with this universal chatbot that you're going to build and launch, chances are some of the answers may not be right. Mm-hmm. And in today's world, people live in TikTok moments. People have very little patience for things. So picking someone off is a matter of few things going wrong. So when you have them, it's also an ability to build the brand up. It's also an opportunity to get detractors. So I feel that blend of having some humans take the negative effects of false positives out in the short term while you work to make it better in the long term may be more of the right approach for most companies.
Well said. Well said. So as we start to wrap this up, Dave, again, from the mindset of the companies that are joining the Digital Experience Collaborative, what do you think the key takeaways are here?
Yeah, there is so much good stuff that you've described. And Duta, I love this last comment that you made. It's just a key reminder for us that prediction is not the same as truth telling. That's a really important thing for experienced strategists to remember. And so you're trying to give people a range of possibilities, but the right range of possibilities, which is fantastic. You know, we as experienced strategists, we have to understand the human element, but we also have to understand the role that digital is going to play in people's lives going forward. And that is a big task to take on. And it requires some of the behavior skills that Aransas, you lead out for us, but it requires an understanding of how we interact with technology as well. So I think this is going to be a very important podcast for our groups as we get started with the collaboratives for next year.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Duta. And we do look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you all for having me here. It was wonderful to talk to both of you. And what a wonderful topic. And we truly live in interesting times.
Yes, we do. None of us are going to get bored. For those of you listening, we're excited to hear what you're seeing in terms of shifts in digital experiences. So please reach out to us on LinkedIn. We're easy to find there. We'd love to chat with you about what you're learning and to, as always, keep learning together. So find out more about what we're doing on the collaboratives at stonemantle.co. And again, keep in touch. We are all in this together as experienced strategists. And the more we can solve these complex challenges and these crazy times together, the more likely we are all to be, as I said before, more right more of the time. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Experience Strategy Podcast. If you're having fun nerding out with us, please follow and share wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Find more episodes and continue the conversation with us at experiencestrategypodcast.com.